You're listening to the Mormon Theories podcast, and I'm your host, Ryan Hinckley. Hey guys, my guest today is my friend Ed Goble. Ed has been researching the Book of Abraham for decades and has a super interesting theory about Joseph Smith's translation of the Book of Abraham and the Kirtland Egyptian papers at large, including the grammar and alphabet of the Egyptian language. His theory is based on reverse engineering some of Joseph's translations to show that Joseph's work was inspired, and it is really fascinating. I was super excited to talk to him and ask him all my questions. Later on in the podcast, Ed also shares with us some of his theory on Book of Mormon geography and the history of mankind. Really cool stuff. He actually has a really interesting history in the Book of Mormon geography space, and I think you'd be interested to know that. I encourage all of you listening to check out the show notes for this episode at mormontheories.wordpress.com. I've got links to some of Ed's extensive writings and research there, and I hope that you take a look at those. Really cool stuff. A few days before we recorded the interview, I got sick. And so during the interview, I was recovering a bit from that sickness, and so I cough a little bit. I muted myself probably 100 times to cough, and I sound a little tired, so I'm sorry about that, but that's why. So please, if you can get past that, I hope you enjoy the show. Please know that the views of my guests on the podcast do not necessarily reflect my own beliefs or the official doctrine of any denomination, including the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And with that, enjoy the show. At the start of the podcast, I ask Ed to introduce himself, and so he does, and then we jump right in. Thanks for listening, guys.
My name is Ed Goble. I'm late in my late 40s. I've been, a temple worker now, going on and off because the temple's been shut down and so forth. But since about 2008, and I've just been researching things on different subjects for a real long time. Book of Abraham, I've been researching it for, a couple of decades now, but really seriously for about, it's going on, since 2008. So what is that now? 14 years? 15
almost.
years, whatever. Yeah. So, I started out trying to, kind of internalize a lot of the stuff that Hugh Nibley came out with and a lot of the other apologists, and tried to get all of that like really solid in my mind. And, I was trying to be an apologist early on. I don't know. There hasn't always really been a good relationship between me and Fair for whatever reason. Fair is the foundation for foundation for apologetic information and research. They just kind of have their own ideas about how things should be done, and I never fit into that box. Mm-hmm. So to call myself an apologist, maybe I could fit into that. Maybe I don't know. I mean, one reason that I don't fit into it, I think, is because I really want to know the truth instead of just settling, for something that sounds good and something that's the most popular thing that different scholars have decided how it is and so forth in their establishment, So that's kind of the quick background of me. Professionally, I'm a software engineer, so I've always kind of been into science-related subjects. I like paleontology and geology, archaeology, a lot of different ologies that I follow, kind of as a different things as, kind of hobby interests. So I think that a lot of the things that I've studied kind of have in a way, have kind of created a well-rounded way of dealing with things, the way I deal with them.
Yeah.
And so, most apologists, they try to kind of preserve faith. That's kind of what they're about. I want to preserve faith in people, but it doesn't make sense to me to try to do it with lies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the difference between me and a lot of apologists. So I'm trying to get to the core of what's really true. I don't see that they're trying to get the core of what's really true. They're just trying to throw whatever against the wall to see what sticks, and they'll try to popularize that, whatever that is, or whatever their favorite theories are.
Gotcha. Okay. So what are your ideas on the Book of Abraham?
Well, this requires a bit of background, I think. But to really understand what I'm saying, it's going to require a lot of background. But in a nutshell, there are two different major views of the Book of Abraham. In the believing side of things, right? There's the missing papyrus type theory, and there's the catalyst theory. My theory is more on the catalyst side of things.
Okay.
But it has a mix of some of the things, I guess you could say, from the missing papyrus idea, in that some people don't believe that Abraham really wrote the book in the first place. I do believe that he wrote the book in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have good reason to believe he did. And so that means that at some point there was something written down by him in a running text fashion, right? And when we say running text, we mean it was written down the way we read things. When we read a sentence as it's written in our alphabet, the words that we read, in that kind of a writing system, those actually correspond to sounds that we speak.
Right.
Okay, and most written languages are that way. So whatever was written in the first place by Abraham was written in that manner in some ancient language. So whatever that was is missing. The difference that I have with other people that believe that something is missing is that I say that it's been missing since antiquity. I say it's never been in the hands of Joseph Smith at all in our time, in our day, or in this dispensation, or anybody else. So that's why the things that Joseph Smith worked with as tools to produce the Book of Abraham were not that. Does that make sense?
So whatever Abraham wrote down, nobody's had, or at least Joseph Smith didn't have in front of him. Is that what you're saying?
Joseph Smith did not have a running text of the Book of Abraham in front of him.
Okay. Yes. Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the difference between when I say that mine is a catalyst type versus a missing papyrus type. Because when you hear missing papyrus, it's usually people saying Joseph Smith had something in the Egyptian or some other language, some kind of ancient language that represented all the sounds written out. Okay, where somebody else could come along and read the same thing and reproduce it in a written and spoken fashion, right? That is not what Joseph Smith had.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now that means that puts me in the catalyst category. That means that the things that he had were not the Book of Abraham.
Mm-hmm.
everybody that that has any kind of credentials on either side, whether critics or believing scholars, all agree that the papyrus that is in the hands of the church that has the facsimile number 1 on it, the original for what we call facsimile number 1 in the Book of Abraham,
Mm-hmm.
they all agree that the text on that papyrus is not the text of the Book of Abraham.
Right.
Okay. Therefore, whatever Joseph Smith was doing, it was something different than translating this text. Hugh Nibley translated the text. Robert Rittner translated the text. And I could mention any number of other scholars who have translated that text. It all comes out to be what's called the breathing permit of Hor. Okay, breathing permit meaning that it's kind of like permit in the same sense that when we have recommend, we get into the temple. Breathing in the Egyptian, what it really means is something along the same lines as when you're resurrected, you get to enter the realm of the gods. Okay, so in English, a better translation of it might be fellowship. You get to be in their presence. You get to live the kind of life that they live. So you're in the fellowship with the gods, or you have exaltation. That's what it really means, is it's the tool that's kind of getting you your exaltation, so to speak. Okay. And so the text, as Hugh Nibley produced it and others, Hugh Nibley identified it as a version of the ancient endowment.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Now that said, and it's not the source, it's not the text of the Book of Abraham. Going back to now the Egyptian language and focusing in on the facsimiles as we know them, not the text of the Book of Abraham, the facsimiles. We're going to focus on that for a minute.
Okay.
Okay. The facsimiles are pictures.
Right.
Pure pictures. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Those pictures have translations. There's 2 types of translations of those pictures. One are Egyptological identifications, the way Egyptologists identify the mythological and cultural background of the pictures, of what's in those pictures. That's one. Okay. The second one is the text that Joseph Smith produced in the explanations that go along with those pictures. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, those pictures don't have any text in them. Well, I mean, there's some text associated with them, but just, bear with me when I say focusing in on just the pictures of the facsimiles and laying aside for a minute that there is a little bit of text in some of them. Okay. We're just going to say at this point that those pictures are not text, yet they have explanations.
So on the actual papyrus, there were explanations for the pictures?
Not in the papyrus that we have.
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying that the explanations that Joseph Smith produced, there is no Egyptian extant version of that text.
Oh, okay. So
Okay.
Sorry, so they can't really disprove his explanations because there's not really anything indicating what they should be.
Well, uh, they are not translations in the sense of something that we can look at and say, here's the text that Joseph Smith derived this text in English from.
Oh, okay.
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 Okay. However, now we get to the part where the apologists, they'll accept all of the text that Joseph Smith produced, regardless of the fact that there is no Egyptian original for that text. Okay, but the apologists, they recognize that Joseph Smith correctly translated, in air quotes, right? Correctly translated those pictures.
Mm.
Why? Well, there's the side of things where, you can say, well, I believe that Joseph Smith translated them correctly and the Spirit told me so. Okay, well, all of us have that have testimonies, right? Okay, but if you get down into the nitty gritty, why did Hugh Nibley and these other guys that did this, why did they say that they're correct translations? I told you that there were two ways that these pictures are translated. One was the Egyptological identifications of the pictures, and the second one was the Joseph Smith's explanations.
Okay.
Okay, those two match in special ways.
Okay.
Okay, so the reason that the scholars say, oh, this is correct, is because, for example, Joseph Smith's translation, so to speak, or explanation of, for example, Kolob, and the Kolob is just an easy example. Kolob is the first creation, right? Well, the Egyptological identification for the picture is Khnumra. Okay, that's the god of creation.
Hmm.
Do you see what happened?
Instead of it being the first creation, the other translation is the
God
creator
of creation.
Yeah.
What's the common theme?
Creation.
Okay, so do you see that somebody, and you can, there's one, there's like Joseph Smith, you could say that either the Spirit or Joseph Smith clued him in on something ancient, or somebody that had these thoughts in their mind, or that put this in writing somewhere that we don't have, decided to associate the picture of this creation God with something else that has the same theme. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a special pairing mechanism.
Okay.
Okay, that creates a pair.
Yeah.
Okay, and when I mean pair, I mean you cannot have the one without the other. If you just have the Egyptian picture, then it doesn't tell you anything about the intended context.
Right.
Who added the context? It wasn't the guy that first drew this picture, and came up with this mythological god that the Egyptians had for their creation, for one of their creation gods. He didn't associate this picture with Kolob. Who did? Well, that's according to Kevin Barney, who's one of these apologists. He says that there was an intermediary. That intermediary he calls a Jewish redactor, or JRED. That's the term that he uses, because he's convinced that that person was Jewish.
So
I don't see any evidence for an intermediary that was Jewish.
okay.
But I see evidence for an intermediary in the ancient world. And that intermediary was not Abraham, because Abraham wrote the text.
So someone after Abraham.
Someone after Abraham.
Okay.
That person had to be the person that was responsible for the pairing of the idea with the picture.
Okay.
All right. That person most likely was the guy that owned the papyrus. Okay, he was the guy that either had some scribe create this for him or he did it himself. But the fact that he was literate because he was a priest, it's very likely that he himself did it.
Okay.
Which means that he was not only an Egyptian priest, he was a closet believer in Jewish things and Jewish patriarchs and Jewish scripture. Okay, and many of those Egyptian priests back then had that. They had this syncretism of lots of things in their religion with other religions.
Okay.
Okay, so it's not surprising because they had access not only to the temple libraries of, for example, Thebes, where the papyrus that we have was taken from, because there was a temple library there, and that would have been full of religious documents. But we're talking about the Ptolemaic era. Okay, that means that it's the time period after Alexander the Great. It's between Alexander the Great and the kind of the time period of Jesus and the time period of the Romans, the Greco-Roman era or the Ptolemaic era. Okay, and what was the library in Egypt that had everything? It was the Library of Alexandria.
Okay.
And it's called the Library of Alexandria because the Library of Alexandria was in Alexandria, named after Alexander the Great. Okay. And it was a library that had all the documents that they could get their hands on from the ancient world.
Okay.
Okay, so these guys had widespread knowledge of many languages. Okay, and so the widespread knowledge was available not only to them in Alexandria, but many of those books were obviously copied and spread out to these other temple libraries. So they not only had their hands on the Book of Abraham, but any number of other Jewish things, any other number of Jewish scripture.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's how this guy got his hands on the Book of Abraham.
Okay.
Was from these temple libraries because he's a priest.
Right.
Okay, then it's not too much different from what we, how we idolize people in our day, how these guys thought of some of these ancient patriarchs and stuff like that. we idolize superheroes. Some of us wear Superman shirts and so forth with the big S on it. We identify ourselves with our heroes, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's a guy that had a religious religious interest with Jewish literature and Jewish patriarchs, and he identified himself with Abraham.
Gotcha. But
Okay.
it doesn't mean that he was Jewish himself, but he was this Egyptian that was fascinated by the Jewish religion or beliefs.
He was either fascinated or he was a believer in it. And he didn't have to be a believer. He didn't have to be a Jew to be a believer in it.
Right.
He could be one of these syncretists that mix religions.
Gotcha.
And so he could have brought the book of Abraham into, or the story of Abraham and so forth, into his own homebrew religion.
Right. Okay.
But he not only associated himself with Abraham, he associated a specific Egyptian god with Abraham as a symbol for Abraham.
Okay.
And the specific Egyptian god was Osiris, the god of the dead, or the resurrecting god.
Yeah.
Okay, because the figure in the facsimiles is Osiris, the guy sitting on the lion couch, or I mean, not sitting, lying down on the lion couch, that's Osiris. The guy in facsimile 3 sitting in the throne, identified as Abraham, that's Osiris.
Okay.
So not only did this Egyptian priest identify himself with Abraham, he identified Abraham using this, symbol of Osiris.
Cool.
So in a way, it's kind of like if you, for example, go to the temple, for a certain period of time, you're identifying yourself as two individuals besides yourself. One of those individuals is the person that you're doing the work for, and the other individual is Adam. Okay, and you're taking their identities upon you.
Right.
Okay, so it's not surprising that that this person was taking Abraham's identity upon himself and also imposing that identity on the hieroglyph of Osiris. Okay, but there's a lot of connections between Abraham and Osiris, and Hugh Nibley makes a case of the associations between Osiris and Isis, who are these Egyptian gods, and the patriarch Abraham and his wife Sarah. Okay, so that is to us, we recognize that as proxy.
Yeah.
As becoming someone by proxy. There's a word that's used for that when you're taking a symbol and you're imposing a different meaning upon it. Okay, and then this case we're imposing Abraham on the symbol of Osiris. That's called iconotropy or iconotropy, however somebody wants to pronounce that. Okay, but that means image turning or taking a symbol that didn't used to mean something and imposing a special meaning upon it.
Yeah.
And somebody can do that personally, or it can be something cultural that becomes widely known culturally.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's what's happening with this papyrus, is you've got a bunch of symbols that are having things imposed upon them that are not their standard meanings.
Gotcha.
Okay. But there's always a connection between the symbol and the thing that's imposed on it.
So there's
Or
always
the-
so there's always a reason why that symbol has been chosen. It's not just random.
That's right. There's
Okay.
always a very, very specific reason. There's always something that makes those two a pair.
Gotcha. Cool.
Okay. And the fact that we can reverse engineer that pair
Mm-hmm.
means that we can see that we can actually figure out why those symbols were chosen to be used the way they were.
Okay.
Okay, and you understand reverse engineering?
Yeah.
Okay, so for those that don't understand reverse engineering, let's say that I'm let's say that I'm a computer engineer, which I am, but let's say that I'm a hacker of sorts, right? And I work for a company. Now, this is just a contrived example. This is not me in the real world, right?
Right.
But let's say that I'm somebody where I work for one company, and there's some espionage going on there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's another company that's their competitor, and that other company puts out a product, right? And so in order to understand that product, they did not, I mean countries do this too, right? When they get hardware
Mm-hmm.
from other countries, right? So I'm going to reverse engineer the hardware or the software of that other company to figure out what makes that tick.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I figure that out, I don't have a manual. I have to go through and I have to do everything that I have to do, in a systematic way, systematically to figure out what is the underlying system or the underlying facts. What are the underlying facts? Why that is the way it is.
Right.
This is what Hugh Nibley did. This is what Michael Rhodes did between the Egyptological fact of these pictures,
Mm-hmm.
paired up with Joseph Smith's explanations. It's reverse engineering because you can look at one and say, well, here's how these two things relate.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see that there's an underlying example.
Yeah.
Okay. Now we get to the problem. Because the papyrus doesn't translate, everybody says that those other symbols have nothing to do with the Book of Abraham.
Yeah.
Okay. Those other symbols are a written language. They go in order, the way an ancient Egyptian would read text.
Mm-hmm.
That text actually says something, and like I said from the beginning, it's the text of an endowment ceremony or a abbreviation of an endowment ceremony from the ancient world.
Yeah.
Okay, Now, but with our own alphabet, what are the different ways that you can use the letter X besides having the X sound? How has it become used in our day? It's used in engineering, it's used in mathematics, it's used in this, it's used in that. Okay,
Yeah.
there's many ways that the letter X can be used.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so there's this notebook that the church recently published along with these other loose papers that have related content. Okay, those papers were published by the church and as part of the Joseph Smith Papers collection in, the Joseph Smith Papers publications.
Yeah.
That by those papers, by bound and unbound in that collection, are known as the Kirtland Egyptian Papers.
Okay.
Okay. They were published by the church and by those scholars as the papers of Joseph Smith.
Right.
Why did they do that?
Because they were found in his things?
They were the papers of Joseph Smith.
Yeah.
Okay. Those papers were produced under the authority and keys and direction of none other than Joseph Smith. What did Hugh Nibley say about that? Oh, no. That wasn't Joseph Smith. That was his scribes that were responsible for the Kirtland Egyptian Papers. Okay, Hugh Nibley invented that tactic. That tactic continues to be used throughout the church by all the apologists. Why do they do that? What was the reason that they wanted to do that? It's because the whore breathing permit text, the symbols from the whore breathing permit text are used in the Kirtland Egyptian Papers as symbols that are assigned meanings the same way the pictures in the facsimiles are assigned meanings.
Okay.
Now, if you're a critic of the church, what's your first reaction?
That Joseph Smith was faking it.
That Joseph Smith was faking it because he didn't know how to transmit or translate the breathing permit of whore.
Yeah.
Okay, but what did we just find out about the picture of Kenimra?
There's a theme.
There's a theme, and there's a connecting principle that makes a pairing between those two.
Right.
Okay, so now starting out with the first symbol that happened to be in the breathing permit text, that was lifted from the breathing permit text and put in the Kirtland Egyptian Papers. That first symbol was the reed, the papyrus reed symbol.
Yeah.
Okay, it's also the Egyptian letter I.
Okay.
Did Joseph Smith translate it as having an I sound, or translate it as the Egyptian letter I, or said anything about that this is a picture of a reed? What did he say about it? He said it was the um, land of the Chaldees.
Mhm.
And that's one of the first pairings between the Book of Abraham text and one of the whore breathing permit symbols.
Yeah.
What do you do with that? Well, first of all, we notice that our own alphabet, the letter A, what's it a picture of?
It's a
Not a
bull.
pit. Okay, but that's correct. But to get there, you have to go through
Yeah.
some analysis, right?
Right. Yeah.
But in the Latin alphabet, which we use, it's not a bull. It's just an A.
Mhm.
Okay, but it's a stylized picture of a bull,
Mhm.
of the head of a bull. You're right, because that was the original intent of the Aleph picture, right?
Yeah. Right.
And it was an Egyptian hieroglyph that the Proto-Sinaitic picture of a bull was taken from. It was originally a picture of a bull.
Mhm.
Now, the Egyptian picture of a reed is a picture. It's a picture. It's a letter I, but it's a picture. Okay,
But
what
Joseph,
did we?
it's a picture, but
It's a
Joseph,
picture of, yeah, it's a picture of a papyrus reed.
yeah.
Okay, we were dealing with pictures in the facsimiles.
Mhm.
Okay, what does the papyrus reed have to do with the land of the Chaldees? Oh, everything. Do you see where this is going?
Kinda, yeah.
Okay, so then you take the picture of a reed and you go, what does that have to do with the land of the Chaldees? Well, the land of the Chaldees in Sumerian is Kien-gi, land of reeds.
Mhm. Very cool.
Joseph Smith, the vocalization that he attached to that, the pronunciation of that symbol was Chalcedon Hiash or Chalcedon Hiash. The Kassite pronunciation of that. The Kassites were the Chaldees.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the lots of people associate the Aramaic with Chaldee because in the Bible dictionaries and so forth they would say that that Aramaic is what they're talking about when they say Chaldee. No, they're talking about the Kassites because the word Chalcedoniash is like some kind of a variant pronunciation of the Kassite word Cardoniash
Mhm.
or Carduniash.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the name of the land of the Chaldees for a long time that they used Carduniash.
Wow.
Okay, but then the other version of the name that Joseph Smith applied to that was Zakioniash. Zakioniash.
Mhm.
The word the ancient Iranian for that is Kasakon. Sakon. Zakion.
Hmm.
It's the ancient Iranian version.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith didn't have a papyrus with this written down, this name.
Right.
Neither one of these versions of this name.
And he probably didn't know those languages.
Right, but everything, yeah, the Kassite, the closest language that we know of to Kassite is Hurrian. We don't even have much vocabulary from the Kassite language. And so there's these sprinklings of the words that we do know of from Kassite in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. And here's these other apologists blaming the Kirtland Egyptian papers on W.W. Phelps and not giving credit to Joseph Smith. Why? Because not only do the critics believe Joseph Smith couldn't translate, the apologists don't believe that any of these translations in the Kirtland Egyptian papers are correct either.
Yeah.
So what do? They blame it on Phelps. Okay, so what we have here is this thing where each one of these symbols, some ancient person, like I'm saying, Joseph Smith didn't come up with this, and neither did Abraham. Some ancient person decided that they were going to use these letters in this text as pictures. And that each and every one of those pictures, they were going to attach an explanation. Exactly like each one of those pictures in the facsimiles. Exactly the same. Same exact principle. And so the apologists accept the facsimiles because that's the easy part. You go through and treat every single one of these Egyptian hieroglyphs, whether they're in the hieratic, which is the it's no different than okay, so there's three kinds of Egyptian script that are the most common, right? There's hieroglyphic, there's hieratic, and there's demotic. Okay, these are the three common ones.
Okay.
Hieratic and demotic are cursive versions, okay, and hieroglyphic is the picture version. So each one of these hieroglyphics is a letter, but it's also a picture.
Yeah.
And each one of these, even when they're, if you have a text that's an Egyptian text written out in hieratic or demotic, the first thing that an Egyptologist will do when they're translating that is to go character by character and transliterate it from the demotic or hieratic version to the hieroglyphic version. So they get it to the version of the characters that's the picture version, and then they'll translate.
Okay.
Okay, so it doesn't matter that some of these are the cursive versions of the characters. All that matters was that once you get it to the hieroglyphic equivalent, that it's the picture version that we care about. It's when it's the application of the picture of that is that character that we care about. Yeah. Okay, it's not what the text says. Yeah, we care about what the text says. That's fine. I mean, it has a little bit of relation. There's some things in the text that have a little bit of relation here and there to Abrahamic themes, but what we really care about is the pictures. So what you have is you have a bunch of pictures that that were used as symbols to symbolize different themes and things, so forth and so on, that tie between the picture and the explanation, exactly like the facsimiles. Every single one of those pictures, or those characters, when they're used as pictures, every single one has this.
Cool. Very cool.
Every single one. You got all these people apostatizing from the church, and you got a bunch of apologists telling everybody that Phelps is responsible for Joseph Smith's papers. The critics know Joseph Smith is responsible for his own papers, and the critics laugh at it. And then people that apostatize from the church, they find it laughable that the apologists are trying to do this.
Yeah.
Yet the apologists, are not paying attention to the current scholarship, so to speak. How about listening to the people that are actually doing scientifically sound research? Because if what's scientifically sound about saying there's a missing papyrus when there never was one? Throughout the Kirtland Egyptian papers, there is nothing, not a bit from, we got tons of characters copied from the breathing permit of Hor in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, and a ton of characters copied from the Book of the Dead manuscripts that were identified with the Book of Joseph. I mean, we're not just talking about Book of Abraham. We're talking about papyri that were identified with the Book of Joseph. And there's some content in the Kirtland Egyptian papers that may relate to that Book of Joseph. I mean, do you see the problem? Okay, so well, going back, I've found example after example after example. It's always, these things that they get caught up with, where they say, oh, well, so you have this character from the Hor breathing permit, and in this Book of Abraham manuscript, it's juxtaposed to, some section of the Book of Abraham text. Well, duh, it's because it has something to do with it. Mm-hmm. That picture has something to do with it.
Yeah. But
it's a picture. It's not text. I mean, in this usage, it's not text.
Yeah.
And when I say that this is catalyst, this is along the same lines as the catalyst theory. This is the mechanics of the catalyst.
Right.
Okay. Some people that believe in the catalyst, they'll go, oh, well, let's see. So Joseph Smith, he just kind of stared at this thing, and it's kind of like, so Joseph Smith and those guys on top of Zelph's mound, they discovered Zelph's bones. And so Zelph, on those bones, acted as catalyst. So Joseph Smith was actually able to get a revelation on this guy's history and of his life from his bones. Mm-hmm. Okay, these guys think that just by having a papyrus in their minds that had nothing to do with the Book of Abraham, that Joseph Smith was just able to kind of, divine from this thing that has nothing to do with it, the text of the Book of Abraham.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't work that way, because there was an ancient connection, and that ancient connection was the way that Hor, the priest, used these symbols as pictures for illustrations for the Book of Abraham text. I mean, we're not talking just about the illustrations that are in the facsimiles. We're talking about other pictures throughout the papyrus that were used as pictures to illustrate the Book of Abraham text, because they were employed that way.
Yeah. So you've given us the example of the reed and the land of Chaldees.
Yep.
What are some other examples that you found that would match up?
Yeah. So, for example, another good example, going back to Kolob, right?
Yeah.
And this is tough because we're talking about pictures, and we're talking about we're doing this, through audio.
Yeah.
So if you notice a facsimile to figure 1, it's Kolob, and we went, we were talking about this before, but you look at the picture, and it's a god figure that's seated, and it has these ram heads.
Yeah.
Those ram heads are, what was pasted on there, but it's still valid. Those ram heads there's a duality there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's one looking right and the other one looking left. And the seated God figure there, it's also a mirror image, right? So it kind of looks like a mountain kind of figure.
Yeah.
But that's actually, the body and the legs of the seated God, and it's like mirror image.
Yeah.
Okay. So now there's in the whore breathing permit, you've got the in the and as we read the text, it's part of the name Takibet. Takibet was the name of Whore's mother. Okay, when in that section of text, when it's talking about right next to the Book of Abraham, there's like these columns.
Yeah.
Or right next to the figure 1 or facsimile 1. Getting myself mixed up a little bit. Facsimile 1 in the whore breathing permit, the version of it that's in the whore breathing permit, we have these columns of characters. Okay. Those columns of characters, the purpose of those are that Hor is giving his genealogy and his identity. Okay. And he's saying, I am, priest of the god Khonsu. My mother was Taikibet. My father was Osaiwer, and he was the priest of Min and this kind of stuff, right? Priest of the god Min and blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you take those characters one by one, and you go along with the other usage here, right, of those characters. We're not saying that of course it translates to what it translates. We're talking now about a symbolic, pictographic, whatever the right word is, usage of the same symbols. That's a secondary application of an entirely different system of usage of the same characters. Okay, and it's Hor that did it. He's the guy. Okay. So you focus in on the character for Kolob as identified in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. Okay, that picture is the letter B. Oh, wait, no, I'm goofing up here. Yeah, that's right. It's the letter B. Okay, it's a seated woman. Okay, and she has the same, you know, if you cut that picture in the facsimile to figure 1 in half, the seated woman figure, it's the exact, it's a visual pun is what it
Yeah.
is. And going back to what all of these things are, the word that would describe them best is pun. Whether they're visual, when I'm talking about these principles that tie one thing to another,
Mm-hmm.
that tie the picture. Well, and this happens in the facsimiles and in the breathing permit text, that these textual characters that are used in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. It's the same thing, but every single one of these relations are a pun, whether it's a visual pun or whether it's a pun of some kind of, sound alike pun or this or that. They're all puns. In this case, for Kolob, it's a visual pun for one thing, because the characters look real similar. The other one is that the word for woman in Egyptian is kemet, and that shares a lot of the same consonants as the name Kenumra.
Yeah.
So it's a pun of sound alike characters,
Mm-hmm.
for one thing, and it's also a visual pun. And then going back to why there's the word kolob in Hebrew is not only, to be near, or krb is actually because in the Semitic, right, in different Semitic languages, the R and the L are interchangeable. The actual Hebrew root in this case is krb, which means to be near. KLB is just another version, but KBR is, they swap, sometimes related Semitic root words swap consonants. Okay, so one of the words that's used for help meet is one of these related words for kolo.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so help meet in the sense of woman, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Or opposite. And this is going also back to the mirror image thing, where opposites, right? Opposite sides in a mirror image,
Mm-hmm.
or looking at your, if you're married and you're looking at your spouse, it's your helpmeet, or it's a weird coincidence that so many people, when they're married, I don't get it. I went into a whole nother theory that I'm not really going to get into, why there's weird coincidences in the way sometimes spouses look similar, but it's almost like you're looking at your mirror image, right?
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's that sense. It's that sense where there's puns there, puns of meaning, puns of sound, puns of look-alike characters. So in this case, there's a match, and that's the reason why Hor chose that for particular symbol for kolob, because it has those pun relations with the Kenumra character, right?
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
that's the let's see. I'm just trying to think of whether I got this right, whether it was because I might be telling you the wrong thing, because I don't have this right in front of me as far
That's all
as
right.
like what letter that Oh, no. I did get that wrong. Okay, so the letter B is a different one. The uh, woman character is the Egyptian determinative character, meaning, context giver characters. It's the context giver for, things that relate to women. That's the picture of a seated woman. And also, it's also because the women are involved in the creation process very heavily, obviously,
Yeah.
more than men, a lot more than men. But Khnumra is also not only the god of creation, but the god of childbirth.
Mm.
So you have these mythological connections between Khnumra and Kemet, the woman hieroglyph and so forth and so on. It just gets deeper and deeper as you dig for this, like I say, this principle of reverse engineering. And then the critics, well, they say, oh, that's parallelomania. Well, it worked for Nibley. You guys, critics, you guys can make all the accusations of parallelomania that you like, and even you apologists that don't agree with this way of doing things, you can go ahead and make your accusations of parallelomania, while I find more and more, and me and my partners, we find more and more and more examples. And someday we'll have so many examples that nobody can say nothing about parallelomania. You can say all you want, but the system is this is as if the Kirtland Egyptian papers acted as a second Rosetta Stone for reverse engineering of another. In this case, it's not the Egyptian language in specific, because the Rosetta Stone was used in a reverse engineering exercise because you had these knowns, right? You had 3 different scripts on the Rosetta Stone. You had Greek, you had Demotic Egyptian, and you had hieroglyphic Egyptian. And Champollion knew that that these 3 texts had the same message. One of those messages was in a known language at the time. It was Greek, right? And so he knew that there were certain things in that message where there were names of people, and then so he was able to reverse engineer things going off of cartouches and so forth, the Egyptian versions of those names in hieroglyphic, and then you just keep working, reverse engineering things from there once you have, so I mean, this is exactly the same. In this case, this is reverse engineering of the system that Hoare used of a symbology. This is not text.
Right.
This is symbology of a pictographic system that was secondary to the Egyptian running text. This is the reverse engineering of the pictographic system that Hoare used to use his own symbols of his own breathing permit to go along with the Book of Abraham for illustrations. This is what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Kirtland Egyptian papers work as a reverse engineering key, the same way the Rosetta Stone, was used. Except now our knowns are the Egyptian language. We know the Egyptian identifications of these symbols. We know the way Joseph Smith explained their pictographic usage in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, and all we have to do is compare.
all we have to do is compare the two data sets, just like Hugh Nibley did, just like Michael Rhodes did with the facsimiles and the explanations. No difference whatsoever. And if it's good enough for Hugh Nibley, it's good enough for me. If the system is the same, and the apologists deny, the apologists, like one of the the editor that was working with me for some of my papers. I compiled my papers into a book now, but one of the editors that was working with my papers was Jeff Lindsay,
Okay.
assistant editor of Interpreter. Right, he's sitting there working with me for months and months and months on some, and he's looking at some of these pairings from the Kirtland Egyptian papers, and he's going, "Oh, this is remarkable stuff." And then I bring, the ancient alphabet stuff into it, saying, "Okay, this is, Joseph Smith's Egyptian alphabet. That's what he called it. Why did he call it that? Oh, because these are Egyptian alphabetic characters." I mean, the same as our alphabet. So why not? Why wouldn't he call it Egyptian alphabet and grammar? Why grammar? Well, because he's telling you how they were used, the rules, not grammar of how something is, read out like a text, grammar of how, rules of usage of the pictures. And so, so Lindsay, he's like, "Oh, we can't get past this. This part, we can't publish this." So I'm like, and then Lindsay is also one of those, insisting that it was Phelps that did this. And I'm like, so I came up with this, I'm like, okay, maybe I can come up with some kind of compromise with you guys, and I can say, well, I guess it's possible that Phelps did it. I don't believe that, but let's say, for the sake of peer review, let's just come up with something, that might make it past peer review. I don't know. And this was, I kind of felt like this when I was trying to come up with this plan, that I was kind of selling myself out a little bit, but I'm like, okay, like no other way, because these guys are, they're just stuck on this scribes did it thing. It had to be Phelps.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, Jeff, how about this? Okay, we say that maybe Phelps did it, but he got some of the information from Joseph Smith. That's why we're finding some of this stuff in here. I'm like, okay, that's a possible explanation, but in my heart of hearts, I know Joseph Smith did this. Those are his papers. The Kirtland Egyptian papers are Joseph Smith's Revelations papers. They are not Phelps. I mean, Phelps was the clerk. Phelps and Cowdery and some of these other people that were the clerks. I mean, or do we say that Joseph Smith, or do we say that Cowdery was the author of the Book of Mormon? No. Or the translator of the Book of Mormon, because he happened to be do you see the absurdity here?
Yeah.
And, they do it so that they can distance Joseph Smith from this stuff, only because they refuse to look at the current, we're supposed to look at current research. They refuse to look at the, and then they refuse to publish the research. Well, I had an opportunity to get this published as a book, and then I'm like, I put this book out, because there was a statement that kind of resonated with me, because I made an offer to Jeff Lindsay. I'm like, how about I write my stuff, and then you write your rebuttals to my stuff, and I write my rebuttals to your stuff, and we publish it as a book. He's like, no, I don't have the bandwidth for that. So I put it together in my own book now, but the point that he made was, he says, if the book is in print, it will fade, meaning, there's going to come a time when the book is going to be out of print. It may not sell much, maybe people won't really be that interested in it, because there's this little segment of the church that's interested in it, a little tiny segment. And the apologists are not interested, because they're blind as far as I'm concerned. But because here it is, it's just staring at them in the face, and they're letting all these people perish in unbelief. They would rather lie about Joseph Smith not being responsible for the Kirtland Egyptian papers, and they would rather put Phelps as being the person responsible. That's irresponsible. That's not acceptable. That is not scholarly. That's not scientific. That's a lie, and people are leaving the church over it. I'm coming out and I'm going to say this, what I'm saying in, interviews like this, and I'm going to present it at Sunstone, and I'm going to leave my stuff out on academia.edu and on my Google Drive, because I think that over time people will have access that way. Mm-hmm. And and people and let the chips fall where they may.
Mm-hmm. I just want to say it's sad that they won't just publish your stuff. I mean, they don't even
they can publish it with their own rebuttals. All that matters would be that they publish it. That's all that matters.
Even if they said like this isn't necessarily what we believe at our publication, but here's an idea. Like I wish that.
Well, not even that, because see, about the peer review and interpreter, mm-hmm. It's all about what they agree with. Yeah. It's not about whether whether the evidence can be argued. It's mm-hmm. not about it's not about how how well the evidence is documented. It's all about whether they agree.
Right.
It's all about them. It's all about whether they agree with it, and it's whether it goes along with their apologetic preference.
You mentioned that you were going to speak at Sunstone. Do you have a date? Do you have a date for that yet?
Whatever date Sunstone is in 2022, this material is going to be presented at Sunstone.
Awesome.
We're not just talking. Okay, let's give an example of Nahum, right, in the Book of Mormon. Mm-hmm. That's one. The apologists that's one thing. The apologists make the biggest deal out of that, and parade it around as if it's the biggest thing since sliced bread for the last 30 years or so, that however long it's been, I don't know now.
Yeah.
That Nahum has been a thing. That's one stinking place name. Mm-hmm. I have example after example after example that are bullseyes of that nature, mm-hmm. over and over and over again, and they don't give a damn.
Yeah, it's really sad, super sad. I have a question. You mentioned in the earlier on, you mentioned that there were some things in the Kirtland Egyptian papers that had to do with the Book of Joseph. And we mm-hmm. don't know very much about that book. At least I don't. So what could you tell us about the Book of Joseph?
I don't know much about it, except that these symbols that are derived from the Book of Breathing, or not. I mean, okay, let's go back for a second. We got the Book of Breathings, or otherwise known as the Sen Sen, or the Breathing Permit of Hor. Okay. Then we have the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is the Book of Going Forth by Day. They both are very temple-related books from ancient Egypt, right? And the way they employed the symbology, at least the Abrahamic symbology, when they decided to employ that stuff, either they or he, I mean, the one that I assume at this point is Hor, because he's the one that did his own book, okay, as far as I'm concerned. Whoever was responsible for the Book of the Dead copies, the same type of symbology is used in those, and there's actually this name spelled out. And I mean, it's, in this case, it's not just like it's not just like a symbol, where it's a picture. This is a picture, but it also, the name is spelled out in the Book of the Dead. Okay, and that name is Katu Min. Okay. And Joseph Smith took the symbol that is the first symbol of the name Katu Min, which is the cobra. Okay. It's the Yaret, or the uraeus, the crown, the snake on the crown. Okay, it refers to the queen.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the Egyptian pronunciations of Yaret is cat. It's the first part of the name Katumin, and Joseph Smith pronounced it Katumin. And the symbols that he lifted from the Kirtland, that are found in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, that are lifted from the Book of the Dead, spell out the name Katumin.
Wow.
My partner, my cousin, Vincent Kuhn, he noticed that the name is actually spelled out. But it's not spelled out in such a way that, going by the text, that you would, just read it like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, it's spelled out.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so there's all this information in the Kirtland Egyptian papers about Katumin,
Mm-hmm.
and her father Oneita. And Oneita, I don't know how that relates precisely to the Book of Joseph. I don't know. But, this is talking about a crown. And, the Kirtland Egyptian papers refer to the crown of the princess, Katumen. And it's a symbol of the crown. It's the uraeus, the Yaret, the cat.
Well, that's cool. Very cool.
So yeah, there's some kind of, I don't know, but it's specifically in the valuable discovery section of the Kirtland Egyptian papers that has this stuff lifted from the Book of the Dead text.
Mm.
And it's the part of the text that Oliver Cowdery associated with the Book of Joseph. Don't know.
Okay.
Don't know why yet.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Okay. So, my theory is an explanation for evidence.
Mm-hmm.
It is not, it's driven by evidence. It's
Right.
not an explanation that I came up with first and then decided that this was my theory and that I was going to prove that this is how it is.
Right.
This is the evidence in the Kirtland Egyptian papers that was reverse engineered from the evidence. And it's the evidence that shows this system over and over and over again. This is not, ignoring the fact that the Hor breathing permit says one thing and that the Kirtland Egyptian papers say another. It's not that. It's the recognition that these things spell out one thing and that the symbols are used in just this other way as well. It's not a denial that one thing is one way and that trying to say that it's not that way and that because, okay, you're familiar with the book, maybe The Mormon Scientist by Henry J. Eyring, who's the brother of Henry B. Eyring.
I haven't read it, but I'm familiar with. I know what it is.
Yeah, his father was Henry Eyring,
Mm-hmm.
the brother-in-law of Spencer W. Kimball. Henry Eyring was a scientist. Okay, he was a chemist.
Famous scientist.
Yes. And in Mormon Scientist, Henry Eyring says, or Henry J. Eyring, let's get it straight. He says that his father followed the logic of and this and that. Okay, in the case of the Book of Mormon and the Bible, it's not this versus that. It's not this is true and that's not true. It's this is true and that is true.
Mm-hmm.
The logic is simple Boolean algebra. I'm a software engineer. I deal with Boolean algebra all the time. It's this and that.
Okay.
Okay. The reason that I believe on so many things the way I do is because I recognize that it's not a binary proposition in the sense that it's a or, right? It's not this or that. It's this and that. It's binary in a different way.
Yeah.
Okay. It's Boolean algebra, which is used with binary logic in computer programming. And so you say Book of Mormon and the Bible. When these two nations run together, those accounts from those two nations run together also.
Mm.
This and that. Okay, so this is not saying, oh, the Hor Papyrus doesn't say that. It doesn't say what Hugh Nibley and Rittner and all these other people translated. No, it's saying, yes, it does translate to that. Okay, but now the symbology of these as pictures, as the symbology that Hor himself applied to these symbols is this, and it happens to be the same one used in the facsimiles, as accepted by Hugh Nibley and Michael Rhodes, who did all that reverse engineering in the facsimiles, between the facsimile pictures and the explanations. It's just simply applying the same exact system to the symbols in the Hor breathing text, but treating them as the things that they are. They're just Egyptian pictures. They're Egyptian letters. That's why Joseph Smith called it the Egyptian alphabet and grammar. It's not saying that the Kirtland Egyptian papers is some key that, shows, that shows how, this or that or the other. It's that these show a system. The system is what is figured out the way things work, that's generalized, is what you find out when you reverse engineer something.
Mhm.
Okay, and so Nibley and Rhodes reverse engineered what was happening in the facsimiles. I didn't make this up. I didn't come up with this. Nibley did. Nibley and Rhodes did.
Mhm.
I extended the usage of their very same system to other Egyptian characters. That's all. This is not new.
Yeah.
There's nothing new here. This stuff, this reverse engineering, has been out for decades. It's just extending the same exact thing to the other Egyptian characters
Right.
that are in question.
Yeah.
And this isn't me going off in something saying that there's hidden crap in the core papyrus that's like this is not me saying that there's some encoding mechanism that with hidden information, the way Joe Sampson said when he came out with his book, Written by the Finger of God. That's what his take on it was, that there was these hidden things that were all, using the stuff that the Kabbalists use, to divine stuff in the Hebrew text. No, this is not what this is at all. This is like Joseph Smith said, this is this, and you go and you look, you just simply, say, well, this is why. This is the Egyptological reason Joseph Smith said that. This is not, oh, this is some hidden thing in the papyrus. All of this is out in plain sight for everyone to see. This isn't a hidden code. This is, if it was, the reason that it's not a hidden code is because Nibley was able to say, here's the Egyptian understanding of this symbol, and here's Joseph Smith's, and guess what? Here's how they match. It's a no-brainer. It's
Yeah.
It's the same thing Champollion did to reverse engineer the Egyptian language in the first place.
Mm.
It's just a reverse engineering of a symbology, and it's still human communication. It's not. Richard Dawkins came up with the idea of what's called a meme. Okay, and his terminology is spread, and in usage, to where it's become really popular, on the internet and so forth. But Richard Dawkins was the one that basically coined the idea of a meme. But in this case, he's saying that a meme is a unit of human communication. Let's put it that way, right? So the Egyptian usage of these symbols here is ancient, between the explanations and the facsimile pictures, just focusing on those for a second. If you have a picture, and its usual general interpretation is, oh, that's Khnum-Ra, god of creation. That's not a meme. Why is it not a meme? Because it's nothing. It's a blank slate. Okay, because it's not a full unit of human communication. The full unit of human communication is the pairing between the Egyptian symbol, the Egyptian identification of that symbol, and Joseph Smith's usage in his explanation. That's the meme. That's the full unit of human communication. That's why when you say, well, the critic would say, well, this is unintelligible in the Kirtland Egyptian papers, because he's got these pairings of these symbols, and he's saying they're equal to these explanations in English. because they're juxtaposed to them, just like in a dictionary. Well, yeah, that's because you don't get the system. The system. The system. Right? And how is it that this is a unit of human communication? Well, it's because this is paired with that. You know, if you have a mathematical problem in your homework, right, in your algebra class, and you just have the letter X, doesn't tell you anything. You need the problem.
Yeah.
Okay, the problem is the mean. Okay, the human communication there is where you solve for X, and then finally at the end of the problem, you have a pairing between X and the number that it represents.
Yeah.
But you got there by the problem. You engineered your way to the human understanding and the background of how X is equal to 2, for example. Okay, here we have a problem set up by Joseph Smith. And this here is a pairing between this symbol and this explanation in the Kirtland Egyptian papers. Okay, so it's the same as this equals that, except it's not equals. It's this relates to that. A better way in mathematics is the squiggly equal sign. This is approximately equal to that. And it's not. It's because it's not equal. It's like another thing. For example, in ancient usage, we're used to the idea of when we have a symbol, we think that symbol means something, right? But in the sacrament, our symbols are not equal to Jesus Christ. They're not equal to his blood. They're not equal to his body either. Mm-hmm. They are pointers. They point to. They're not a reference. See, when you say you have a dictionary, right, and you say this is that, the dictionary entry is a pairing between this and that, and you're saying this is equal to that, just like in a math statement of X is equal to that, right?
Yeah.
That's a dictionary entry. The Kirtland Egyptian papers entries are not like that. They're more like the approximation symbol, right? They're like bread is equal to, or bread is approximately equal to body, or water is approximately equal to blood. It's not an equal sign. It's a relation.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying Knumrah is a relation to Kolob. It's not equal to.
Yeah.
This is why this is not a translation. It's a symbology. It's a thing that points to something else that has something in common with something else.
Yeah.
And the mechanism, the pairing mechanism, are a bunch of different kinds of puns. Whether it's visual, auditory, whatever, thematic, they're all puns. That's the linkage between this and that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it wasn't Joseph Smith that came up with this stuff. This is classical ancient Egyptian. Punning is the very basis of the Egyptian language. You don't spell something out in Egyptian by it's the rebus principle, where you're saying this is a picture of this and this is the name of that thing. And so if I say, this is like an English example, of what I'm saying. Okay, imagine that instead of spelling out the word carpet, instead of writing it out as C-A-R-P-E-T, right? Let's say that you spell out the word carpet by using a picture of a car and a picture of a dog, carpet.
Mm-hmm.
Those are two puns. Okay, so there's nothing new about this. This is just Egyptians playing around with games of sounds and pictures. Okay, and this is the very basis of their language.
Mm-hmm.
That's why the absurd thing is that people can't see that the very basis of their language is the very basis of the Kirtland Egyptian papers. Okay, so here's another thing that I'm talking about, right? So they go off of the assumption that Joseph Smith and Phelps were using Athanasius Kircher's system. Okay, what was his system? His system was that he would see a picture of an Egyptian thing and he would just divine it. You know, it would just be like, okay, I'm just going to come up with something that I think goes along with this picture.
Yeah.
But not only that, he would come up with paragraphs and paragraphs of stuff. And so they go, oh, well, look at all the paragraphs that go along with this picture. Okay, well, you guys, you guys speaking to the apologists, you guys accept all of the whole paragraphs of information that go along with the picture and the explanations and the facsimiles, and you're not moaning about it. Okay, let's count how many paragraphs go along with each one of those pictures in the facsimile explanations, and you're not moaning about it. Okay, but that's because there was a long explanation that was prophetic that goes along with that picture. Well, it doesn't mean that the picture contains that information. That information is prophetic. See, this is when I they like, well, it doesn't translate to that. No kidding, it doesn't translate because it points to the information. It's a pointer. It's not a container of information. There's a big difference between something, when you have a running text of something that translates to a bunch of sounds like English text does, that's a container of information. Mm-hmm. Okay, when you have a picture that goes along with something that points to information, it doesn't contain any of that information at all. It points to it. The only reason that you know it goes along with it is because the guy that put together the explanation and the picture put the two together. They're a meme together. They are a unit of human communication together. The picture by itself is not a unit of human communication.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool.
Why is it the critics all agree that Joseph Smith is responsible for the Kirtland Egyptian papers? Well, it's because that's where the evidence is. Lo and behold, Brian Hauglid had he was an apologist, and then he had a change of heart. I'm not a judge of Brian Hauglid, but whether or not he's a believer is not the point. The point is that he can see that, for example, Brent Metcalf and Dan Vogel, who came out with this big, book lately on the Book of Abraham and all the his critiques of the apologists. In my discussions with Jeff Lindsay, he's like, how come, that's a bunch of garbage that Dan Vogel said. I'm not, no, it's not garbage. It's just through the eyes of a critic. It's somebody that is dealing with evidence in a scientific manner through the eyes of a critic.
Mm-hmm.
In my view, it uses some of the evidence and comes to certain wrong conclusions, but it's 70% right because a critic followed the evidence.
Yeah.
And so that's why the critics are so close to the truth. What part of the truth don't they have? Well, the part where they are unbelievers in the prophet. They're not wrong when it comes to knowing that Joseph Smith was responsible for the Kirtland Egyptian papers. So their conclusions that are based on that are very solid. You notice that I'm not critiquing the critics so much as I'm critiquing the apologists. But is it because that I have personal axes to grind with the apologists? Well, that's the emotional part, but that's not the logic-based part where I'm critiquing a piece of information put out by an apologist that's not based on evidence. See, it's not that the apologists have to agree with the conclusions of the critics. It's that the apologists have to acknowledge when the critics come to correct conclusions based on evidence.
Yeah.
That's scientific.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's a scientific mindset. That's not, these guys want to, they're the only thing that they want is to defend the church at all costs. Doesn't matter if it's a lie. Doesn't matter if it's a misrepresentation of the truth. That's why people are leaving the church, because the truth is misrepresented, by the apologists. And then to the degree that the truth is somewhat represented by the critics, well, of course they're going to side by the critics when they lose faith, because the critics are somewhat right. But see, if you pair the part where the critics are right with the part where, I'm not saying the apologists are entirely wrong, but they are wrong in the key areas.
Yeah.
Wrong in the key areas. And so you take the areas where the apologists are right, you pair that with the areas where the critics are right, and then you examine, things with a reverse engineering mindset. And then, you might not have the whole truth, but you're going to have an explanation that follows the evidence and that explains the evidence in such a way that's with a scientific mindset, and you don't have to apologize. You don't have to defend. The truth defends itself, because there it is. It's just right there. It doesn't, because it's the truth. It doesn't have to be. It's right there, right?
Yeah.
So there's no evading. You can do apologetics by telling the truth.
Well, Ed, I appreciate the work that you do, and I'm glad that you have provided a different way to look at things for those who have questions about the Book of Abraham. We only have a few minutes left.
Okay, so I'll get on Book of Mormon geography real quick. I'll just spit this out as quick as I can. Yeah. Okay, I co-wrote a book with Wayne May in 2002 called This Land, Zarahemla, and the Nephite Nation. Okay, he went on to publish a bunch of whatever, where he was, publishing other things without me in a series with the This Land thing. Okay, so what happened is that I came to know that BYU tested artifacts that he was pushing, as authentic, and they're not. Okay, so Rod Meldrum and all the rest of these characters, they keep pushing these same things, even though it's known scientifically that they're frauds. Well, fortunately, in the book, that I helped write, it was actually my original manuscript, and he added a bunch of junk to it. But, you know, the parts that deal with his artifacts that he was trying to push, the Burroughs Cave and, you know, Michigan artifacts and so forth, I was saying at the time, my gut was telling me, nah, but, you know, I wasn't really listening to my gut. I was so, you know, wanting to get a book out. And, you know, it's probably the spirit telling me, no, don't publish this with this guy, you know, but anyway, I ignored it. But I was trying to say, you know, these artifacts aren't really known if they're fraudulent or not, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so then they did the testing, and, you know, needless to say, you know, Wayne May continues to insist that these things that are known scientifically to be fraudulent, that he pushes them as real. Okay. And so needless to say, I was one of the architects of what became the Heartland theory with Wayne May. And then, you know, Rod Meldrum said, oh, you know, I came up with it long before you guys came. No. He came along a year after that book was published and, you know, kind of took up the torch, right, for the Heartland theory. And then Novell and the rest of the Heartlanders came along and did their thing. And I, you know, still believed in the Heartland theory for a little while after that. But, you know, I had some cognitive dissonance because I found, actually before the first This Land book was published, I found this thing in the Levi Hancock journal that was his, you know, account of the Zelf incident. And so during the Zelf incident, Joseph Smith said, this is the land of desolation, and Onondagas was the king of this area. And, you know, this guy, he was a white Lamanite, and his name was Zelf, blah, 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 blah. Well, so they were in Illinois, the same area that me and Wayne May were trying to say was the land of Zarahemla. Okay, so you see the problem. Here's a quote from in the Levi Hancock Journal of Joseph Smith actually saying, this was the land of desolation.
Yeah. Which is supposed to be north of Zarahemla, right?
Yeah. It totally puts, you know, it totally, you know, because the Heartland theory is supposed to be based off of, oh, Joseph Smith said it. Joseph Smith knew, right? Well, here's Joseph Smith saying that that area was desolation, and that pushes the narrow neck of land south. Okay, so you can see why I can no longer believe in the Heartland theory.
Yes.
This means, okay, so then now going south, the first neck of land that meets Book of Mormon criteria is Tehuantepec. Okay, Tehuantepec, according to the Book of Mormon, narrow neck of land, is right there where the Jaredites lived. They were right there on the neck of land because it says that the city of Lib, one of the Jaredite kings, was right by the neck of land, right there by, you know. And so the main heartland of the Jaredites is Olmec territory. Okay, and so that makes Olmec Jaredite, that makes Tehuantepec the narrow neck of land right there, because you have archaeology and the Book of Mormon saying this is it. Okay, why was the book that I wrote named after this land named Resurrecting Cumorah? It's because I've always, you know, stuck with Cumorah. And when I say resurrecting, I mean let's bring back the New York Cumorah in conjunction with the Mesoamerican theory. Okay, because the old theory was, you know, Panama, South America, New York Cumorah, blah, blah, blah. Okay, there's, you know, you could go into all of the back and forth, oh, it's too far, blah, 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 you know. Okay, we have prophetic whatever saying that the land of desolation was in the Illinois area. Okay, desolation goes from the narrow neck of land all the way up. Okay, New York, Cumorah. Okay, that means that desolation, the people of desolation were the Nephites that lived there and so forth, were the people of the area, Hopewell. Okay, tons and tons of Mesoamerican influence. Tons. So why is it that the Hopewell looked to Maya for their, okay, we're the United States of America. Everybody looks to us for their culture. They want to imitate us. Why is it, if Zarahemla was in the Heartland area, as the Heartlanders say, why was it that the Heartlanders looked to the Maya in Mesoamerica for their culture?
It's a good question.
Okay, and so the Hopewell are the northern Nephite domain. They're all of those forts, all of those cities, if you can call them that, whatever they are, all of that stuff was the Nephite domain in the north. Okay, there was Nephite manifest destiny. The Nephites came from the south and went north. And they, it was their manifest destiny that they would fill that area.
Yeah.
Okay, it was our manifest destiny that our urban centers started out in the east and that we filled all the way to the west.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, their urban centers started in the south and they filled all the way. Of course, the people are a bunch of country bumpkins in the north that didn't generally know how to write. I mean, it's not normal for people to know how to write in the ancient world.
Mm-hmm.
Egyptian normal people don't know how to write. It's the prophets and the kings that knew how to write. And so you're not finding a lot of Hopewell written stuff. And when you find something in Hopewell territory, like a set of gold plates in the New York Cumorah, it's got Mesoamerican writing on it because all of those people that were in all of those people that were, in the area of the United States were either Mesoamerican transplants or they were, intermarried with. Right? So, I mean, the Nephites, it's no big deal for them to have died in New York because it's in the backyard of the, Ohio and Illinois cultural centers of the northern Nephite domain. That's not that's like us. I mean, them having to defend their northern domain is like somebody invading the West and, most of our troops are coming from the urban centers of the East. Duh, that's the urban center.
Gotcha. So
okay, so this is called, Andrew Hedges of the one of the editors of the Joseph Smith papers. He was kind of, sort of, not openly, but kind of promoting this idea of the semi-limited Mesoamerican theory. Okay, semi-limited meaning it's Mesoamerica as the core.
mm-hmm.
Okay, but you have the northern domain and you have the New York Cumorah in that northern domain in its backyard. Okay, and these people are, Mesoamericans for all intents and purposes. They are Mesoamerican transplants or intermarried with. I mean, people talk about why is it that, the Native Americans, have, mostly Asian DNA and all this kind of stuff. Well, because that was the trunk of the people that, the trunk of humanity that was in America before the Nephites and Jaredites showed up.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's the darker skin, the reddish skin of the first peoples is not because God cursed the Lamanites. I mean, there was a curse on the Lamanites, but this skin color is all about just simply intermarrying. All the transplants from other places on the earth intermarry with and are dominated by the bloodlines that are already here.
Mhm.
It's the same reason why Adamic man was eventually overwhelmed and dominated by genes coming from Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal. It's because, the people that were sons of Adam in Missouri eventually met up, with people that were of, derived from Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal and Denisovan.
Yeah.
Denisovan, whatever the name of that, however you pronounce that.
Yeah.
So, it's the same thing. Black Africans aren't black because of the curse of Cain nonsense. Black Africans are black because Cro-Magnons were black. We're whites because we got our skin color from the Neanderthals. The white Europeans, get their skin color from genes that they got from the Neanderthals. So black Africans were black long before some mythological curse of Cain nonsense. Yeah. So it's like it's not a difficult thing to understand that the bloodlines that were Israel in America were overwhelmed genetically. It doesn't. It's like I'm this part Scottish, that part English, and if you do my DNA, you'll see the parts that dominate. And the more my kids intermarry with those same types of bloodlines, the less the other bloodlines are going to be. It's like within a few generations, if I intermarry with enough hazel-eyed, brown-eyed people, I'm not going to have any blue-eyed genes left in me, but that doesn't mean that my pedigree is any different.
Mm-hmm.
But we talk about, for example, that the Y chromosome is only in the male, and the mitochondrial. You can see that my Star Wars fandom is coming out. Okay. Although I hate midichlorians.
Most people do.
Yeah. So you can,
Mitochondria.
Mitochondrial DNA is only in women.
Mm-hmm.
It's only passed down the mother, and as soon as she has a son, he doesn't have that DNA. Okay, right. So there's some DNA left over in some of the South Americans that's from Australian Aboriginal sources. How did that get there? Well, it's because, Australian Aborigines came to South America at some point and mixed in. But, we don't know precisely what markers to look for, it's like we might get a few clues here and there if we're going to go dig up some Canaanite graves from 600 BC, but trying to, compare people that are Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jewish bloodlines with people in America, you're not going to get good results because people on both sides of that equation have had their genes overwhelmed over the millennia. Mm-hmm. So trying to say that Sephardic Jews ought to be, or whatever ought to be the, we've got a sampling problem here.
Yeah.
So, it's scientific and everything, but science changes all the time. Mm-hmm. That's the nature of science, is it overthrows itself all the time.
Yeah. So you kind of touched on it, but what are your thoughts on evolution?
It's as simple as this, there's no need to it's the same reason that the brethren made the change in the Book of Mormon introduction that says that they're not their principal ancestors. of the Nephites and Lamanites are not the principal ancestors of the Native Americans. They're among them. Okay, so I have 2 to 5% Neanderthal DNA in me. What does that tell you about my Adamic part of me? That tells you that either Adam was, his body was created through the same process as the rest, which I don't buy. I don't see a good reason to conclude that. There's nothing. Okay, I have this book called First Man, Then Adam? Something like that. First Man, Then Adam, First Man, something or other. Okay, so this guy's theory is, that there were some extraterrestrials came down, mixed with the natives, right? And that's the Battlestar, the latest Battlestar Galactica, incarnation. In the last episode, that was precisely what it was, is, the sons of God marrying the daughters of men. Mm. And so it's as simple as, it's the same reason why we can't single out genes from Adam. It's because our Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal DNA has overwhelmed it. Same reason that the Native American, DNA has overwhelmed any Israelite DNA. So Adam, he was born of two parents, according to Adam God, right? That I don't believe in. I don't believe in Adam God. I believe in peripheral teachings that come out of Adam God, like, God and his wife came down, according to Bruce R. McConkie. God and his wife came down and had a couple of kids in the Garden of Eden. The first man in the Garden of Eden was Adam, meaning God. Adam is the man of holiness. There's two of them. It's a title. Okay, I reject what Bruce R. McConkie would call the the coming out of the fundamentalist factions, right? I reject the MMP, multiple mortality probation version of Adam God. I reject the Adam and Elohim being the same person nonsense. Mm-hmm. It's as simple as the Hebrew record says that, there was two Adams. And so therefore Adam comes down, has two kids with his wife. They planted the garden in Eden. Over time, some of their kids apostatized, left the place where they were, spread out more. Then all of a sudden, a different skin color appeared among the sons of Cain. And they were where? America. Because they intermarried with the Native Americans.
Okay.
Pre-flood. Then, then the sons of Noah and him and his wife get on a ship in South Carolina, according to Joseph Smith. There was a tsunami, took them out to sea, and then they show up at a place in the Persian Gulf named Eridu. Not Ararat, Eridu. Vowel R-R-T. Both words, Eridu and Ararat, they're the same word. But it wasn't on a mountain. It was on the coast of the Persian Gulf, where right there at Eridu, where Noah landed.
Oh, okay. So would that be south of Mount Ararat?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's exactly where the suddenly in that era the Sumerian civilization appears
Mhm.
in no less the land of the Chaldees.
Mhm.
Okay, but what Eridu is a Sumerian pronunciation for Ararat.
Okay.
The place name spread. The in Hebrew the word har is mountain, but its cognate in Sumerian is kar, which means mountain and land. Okay, so the original said land of Eridu, not Mount of Ararat.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's a mistranslation. It's not reading it in the language that would have been the common language where Noah landed. It's not reading it in Sumerian. It's reading it in Hebrew. It's wrong.
Hmm.
Kar Eridu.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So that's the flood. It was a flood in America, localized, took them out to sea, and so to you know to everybody that doesn't know that the Earth is a sphere, they think that the whole Earth is flooded, and they have no way of distinguishing between water that's just sea and a flood that they've just experienced.
Yeah.
And so, so going back to that, then that remnant of the Adamic race intermarried with, the people in Sumer and people like Pharaoh and Nimrod and descendants of Noah suddenly start dominating the local population, becoming their kings. The local population didn't come on the ark, but they were, they were culture bringers. So Adamic man, getting back to the point, Adamic man was an extension of the heavenly race, and they just simply intermarried with the people that were of Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal stock, and now you have a hybrid race.
Us.
Mm-hmm.
Very
And
interesting.
Elohim is still our great ancestor, but so is Trog the troglodyte, because we're simply hybridized, and it was the crowning event of human evolution. It's like how many things in human evolution are hybridizations? Well, throughout our whole genome, there's remnants of ancient viruses that have become, key pieces of our genome that actually have function in us.
Mm.
Things that were experienced by ancient mammals that, when they had pandemics among themselves and among reptiles and so forth, we've taken on those viruses hybridized with us. And so we're as much, like they were saying that the eyes in chordates come from genes that they inherited from jellyfish, from a hybridization, horizontal gene transfer thing. So we are hybrids. And so the crowning event of human evolution is the hybridization of the race of heaven with the race of earth. And we are definitely descendants of Elohim in our bodies, as much as we're descendants of Israel in our bodies. It's just that our genes are overwhelmed. Oh, people, oh no, you're a Gentile. You're not really from Ephraim. I don't see any Jewish DNA in you. No, our DNA was as overwhelmed as the Native American DNA.
Hmm.
We're just as much Ephraim, those of us that have patriarchal blessings of Ephraim and Manasseh, we're just as much Israel as the Native Americans are.
Hmm. Wow.
It's just that we're also Gentile.
Right. Well, Ed, thank you so much. It's been a really fascinating discussion.
Yeah, sure.
I'll let you get to bed. It's getting pretty late.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Cool.
I'll try to get some links to some of your work and put them on the show notes, and so anyone who's listening can check out your stuff.
Egyptian alphabet and grammar.blogspot.com.
Awesome.
And semi-limited geography.blogspot.com.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
Yep.
Good luck with all of your sunstone things and all the things you're working on.
Yep, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm excited to see that.
Yeah, it's been awesome talking to you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Have a great night.
Yep, we'll see you.
Bye.